you will have to guarantee rights of the all communities, irrespective of religion, irrespective of language, irrespective of culture and any ethnicity.
You rightly mentioned Allama Iqbal.
Yeah.
Dr. Alam, how do you see the relationship of Allama Iqbal and Quaid-e-Azam? Because it's the spirit, the spiritual idea of a nation, the spiritual power, I would say. And then there's Quaid-e-Azam, you know, who is armed to the teeth with dialect, as Stanley Wolford, you know, puts it.
Yeah.
And how do you see this relationship?
Well, for me, it's like how nature determines your course. Because they were far apart in the beginning, and then it started with the letters. So how many of us or our political leadership nowadays is inspired by the letters or by the words or the text? So this is something fascinating for me, that a friendship and bring, as Dr. Awan mentioned, that they were apart and then they were brought together and had their ideas reiterated and reformed. So this is something fascinating.
Many people think that when Quaid-e-Azam left for England, it was Allama Iqbal who persuaded him and convinced him to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And to take part in the politics, because people need him in India, in subcontinent.
Well, let me give you an anecdotal remark first, because both of you mentioned Stanley Wolford. So, recalling his book, he mentioned that because we have this upright and personality like that, we think that he was very rigid. He wasn't rigid at all.
No.
Because what Wolford writes, that when he went to England, he anglicized his name from Muhammad Ali Jinnah Bhai to Ahmed Jinnah. So this is how you accommodate yourself, and this is the same thing, that he was a man who could be convinced through logic. That's why he was convinced by Allama Muhammad Iqbal to come back. So this is,
and there's this constant transformation of ideas, of personality, of becoming what he became, you know, later.
This is what we never talk about, that how Quaid-e-Azam transformed. He was never a rigid man, he was always convinced through the logic. So he was always changing and improving his ideas and his life as well. So this is a very important thing that we never have in the history books very apparently, although it is always over there, lying there, but it is never discussed or debated in the public. So this is an important thing, an important aspect of Quaid's life. And secondly, coming back to the relationship of this dyad of Quaid-e-Azam and Allama Iqbal. So there was a man of constitution, and then there was a man of fantasy. So this is a lethal combination. We lack this dyadic relationship in contemporary Pakistan, that we do not give space to the fantasy men or the men of letters. So this is something which we must learn from this relationship. Secondly, again, a very anecdotal remark, that I came across two words in this discussion. One was his thinking of an egalitarian society. His thinking was not of an egalitarian society, but of a just society. This is very important to know. And then here I think that both the personalities synchronize with each other, because Allama Iqbal had the single thought. Second thing is, he always had a bifurcation of macrocosm and microcosm. In the microcosm, if we revisit his speeches, we see he has clear instructions for do's and don'ts. So for students, you do the learning. You don't have to pick up the weapons. And for Army and Air Force officers in his speeches, you have to defend the country. You don't have to be politics or be in this politics. So this is how he has clear boundaries and frameworks for microcosmic roles. And then on the larger cosmic scene, as you already mentioned, that he was a very staunch advocate of maintaining diversity within with a unity of nation. So this is very important, which we need to learn from
unity and diversity.
That was the primary message he always advocated.
Dr. Kaushal, how do you see this unity and diversity concept, Quaid-e-Azam's idea of Pakistan. We were discussing earlier, we are a Muslim country, Muslim nation, but the minorities, non-Muslims have their rights. Where do we stand at the moment, and how can we work on those ideals?
See, I mean, we see the after partition, I mean, there were many non-Muslim ministers and people who belong to a community which does not belong to religion like Islam. It was very much obvious that the society which he envisaged was something which is, of course, inclusive of religion, available religion people, those were there. But fundamentally, we need to see one thing. Of course, there was a lot of hostilities at that time. The migration happened. A lot of people got, in crossing killed, and it was a huge sacrifice. There was sentimental and emotional thing as well. Because as an academician, we can always evaluate things based on the facts, figures, and then maybe sometime we can take out the emotional or subjectivity outside. But politics is always played in a real world. We see, I mean, just imagine the way the entire things happened, the way people migrated across. It was not an easy, and particularly when the Muslims came, the Hindus went from here. The question is, we see how the overall politics play at that. I mean, even in that context and in that environment, if we have a sort of parliament which we have a law minister, maybe Hindu and some other people, this was very much a clear message for the entire nation as well. Sadly, we need to admit few things that over history, the political journey was not that much correct after that. We had issues, we grappled with the constitutional issues, we couldn't, travel the democratic dispensation the way it should have been. But over the period of time, we came to the constitution and that consensus in 1973. In between is a huge time,
right.
More than 2 decades. So that was something which I guess was something imminent at that time.
Right. We're short of time, and I'll ask Dr. Awan this question. Dr. Awan, since 47, there have been many challenges, but there are a lot of things that are positive. The way we have faced so many challenges, we have fought wars, this war on terrorism, the way we have been fighting poverty. But over the years, if you see that now we have more universities, comparatively, compared to like 20 years back, 30 years back. More hospitals, better health facilities. Although there is a lot of room for improvement, but gradually, albeit slow, I would say, but we are heading in the right direction. Overall, things have been improving.
Well, let me start with this priori, that wherever we deviated from the sayings and the principles of Qaid, we had to face problems. And where we were following those lines, we were making miracles. One thing. Secondly, as you were saying, the issue of how he decolonized, and secondly, you were asking from Dr. Kausar that how he was dealing with non-Muslims. This is such a bleak difference that when he was dealing with the masters, the Christians, the rulers, the British, he was very strict. When he was dealing with the non-Muslim minority here in Pakistan, he was very soft. Let me give you one example. Mountbatten said 2 things. That, well, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, you are going to be head of the state. I hope you will be following the principles of good rulers like Akbar the Great. He was also a Muslim ruler, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah spontaneously responded, well, Mountbatten, this can be a model, but we have a much better model, that is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and that is Muhammad, peace be upon him. He gave us the principles of peaceful coexistence and egalitarianism and equal rights for the non-Muslims. Secondly, Mountbatten claimed that as India is going to accept me as first Governor General, better you also accept. He said, well, Mountbatten, we are going to establish first ideological state. How can I accept the first head of state of an ideological Muslim state, non-Muslim? So you can't be
right.
So he was there. He was not an opportunist. As I said earlier, that even he opposed Muslims where he felt them wrong.
Right.
He opposed Mountbatten, I'm not going to accept this.
Again, being just was his personality.
His personality.
There was General Gracie leading the army. He wasn't against certain state of people in a democratic state. He saw the roles as roles, but although the head was representative, and it was an ideological state, so the head of the state could not be from another state.
Thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Alam, thank you for joining us. Dr. Aban, thank you for your time. Dr. Kausaf, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.
Sarangi is a bowed, short-necked string instrument from subcontinent, which is used in Pakistani classical music. Its flexible tunability and its ability to produce a large palette of tonal color and emotional nuance makes it unique. Carved from a single block of wood, the sarangi has a box-like shape with 3 hollow chambers called stomach, chest and brain. It's usually around 2 feet long and around 6 inches wide. It has 3 melody strings and 11 to 37 sympathetically vibrating metal strings.
Tent pegging is an equestrian sport practiced in many countries around the world. Wooden targets are placed on ground at a specific distance, and players wearing traditional dress and turban have to run their horses and try to hit the target and pick it up with the lance. target missing is considered as a failure. Tent pegging is thought to have originated in the subcontinent. Historians say that mounted soldiers would gallop through enemy camps, removing the tent pegs with their lances and swords. They would be followed by more mounted soldiers who took advantage of the surprise and havoc caused by collapsed tents and a confused enemy. Today, tent pegging is practiced around the world, but is especially popular in Australia, India, Israel, Oman, Pakistan, South Africa and the United Kingdom. The Olympic Council of Asia included tent pegging as an official sport in 1982, and the International Federation for Equestrian Sports recognized it as an official equestrian discipline in 2004.
Assalamu alaikum. You're watching PT World News. This is Muhammad Abdullah Dar with the top stories of this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrives in Doha as the long-delayed peace talks between Taliban and Afghan government are set to begin in the Qatari capital tomorrow. Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Afghan leaders must seize this historic opportunity tomorrow, work together constructively and secure an inclusive, broad-based and comprehensive political settlement. Commander U.S. CENTCOM General Kenneth F. McKenzie Jr. calls on Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa. Prime Minister Imran Khan chairs a meeting in Quetta. Relief activities in rain-affected areas, COVID-19 situation and development projects in province discussed. President Dr. Arif Alvi visits Mazar-e-Kai to pay homage as nation observes 72nd death anniversary of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. World Health Organization praises Pakistan's strategy to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. WHO chief says Pakistan is among 7 countries from whom the international community should learn to deal with corona pandemic. Minister for Food Security Fakhr Imam lauds success in anti-locust operation but says more swarms may enter Sar and Cholistan from Indian state of Rajasthan. Chinese Foreign Minister tells his Indian counterpart it is imperative to immediately stop provocations and other dangerous actions at the line of actual control that violate the commitments made by the two sides. And Serena Williams' latest bid for a 24th Grand Slam singles title ends as Victoria Azarenka rolls back their years to reach the US Open final. Well, that's all for now. For further details and live streaming, log on to our website, world.ptv.com.pk. You can always find us on Facebook page with the name of PT World and follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @WorldPTV. Goodbye for now.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We've been talking about the very sad motorway rape incident since it happened, and of course we all know that it was a reprehensible act, and there can't be two ways of looking at what happened. But actually, another aspect, a very important aspect of what happened is the institutional side of things, is the systemic side of things, is the societal side of things as far as this very, very heinous crime is concerned. Will things ever change, or will we be talking, debating and discussing a crime like this one perhaps a few months down the road? Because we've had the Kasoor rape incident which involved children. We've had numerous other cases, unfortunately numerous other incidents that happen every day, and yet here we are and nothing changes. So the question and issue for me, and I think a lot of the people today, is will things ever change for women? And will women be safe in the streets of Pakistan ever? As a country today, as Islamic Republic of Pakistan, as being part of a religion that grants women more rights, if not equal rights than men, we are here today debating whether women can go out alone, whether women should be accompanied by a male, whether they should have a certain time when they should be going out, all of those considerations. Are those considerations going to change how men think? Are those considerations going to change how people react to a woman outside? Let's talk about all of that today. I have with me Ahmed Jawad, who is a Central Secretary Information, PTI. Thank you so much for joining us today. Barrister Safiullah Ghauri, who is a legal expert. Thank you for joining us. Faika Usman, who is a legal academic and also has been teaching for more than a decade. Thank you all for joining us. We'll also be joined by Maheen Ghani, who is a psychologist and humanitarian, and Nayab Gohar Jan, who is an activist and a journalist. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Ji, Jawad Saab, you know, I'm going to start off with you being a part of the government of PTI at this time. What is your take on what happened, you know, the statements that came out after this very, very sad incident? You know, when we're talking, I'm sure that you're also aware the debate that has started on the social media, and also, you know, a failure to backtrack from that statement. We've seen, you know, multiple other statements coming up after that, backing the same theory that, you know, as far in terms of what time it is when a woman travels, in terms of whether she's accompanied or not. What's your take on this?
Mahrukh, I would like to see this incident in multiple aspects. First of all, I think the most important is the safety of women in Pakistan. And yes, you quoted about the Kasoor incident, the Zainab unfortunate incident, and this incident, or even Saiwal incident, or so many other incidents which we keep hearing in the newspaper, and we are not very sure that what was the finally outcome of those cases. Now this is something which is definitely a matter of great concern for everybody in Pakistan, and which obviously requires reforms in the police, which requires reforms in the judiciary, our judicial system.
Reforms in thinking.
That subject, I'll take it separately. Okay. With that, I can comment on that. That our thinking now, our thinking is reflected either through social media or the media. Media obviously is still very well regulated. I mean, if today I have a mic, so I have this mic because this television studio knows my background, my education, and they consider, okay, he is a suitable person to talk about on this subject, and so are the other participants.
Right.
Now this rule is not applicable on social media.
Okay.
Now social media is giving a mic to everybody irrespective of his education, her education, I mean the background, the thoughts or training or anything. So it can be anybody, a frustrated, sick-minded person on the social media. He is equally using that mic and he is saying what he feels likes. And that is, I think, also the second matter of concern, because whenever such incidents happen.
But Jawad sir, what about the statements made by people who have the education, who should have had, the know-how to know when and what to say, who should, in my opinion, or a lot of people's opinion, know better?
Mahrukh, I agree. CCPO's statement, I think no person in Pakistan, whether in the government or anywhere else, cannot recommend that kind of a statement. I mean, you cannot become a counselor at this stage and advising the women of this country that how you should go and where you should go, what time you should go. I mean, at this moment, you are a policeman who should be thinking about how this unfortunate incident has happened, what is his responsibility, and he should be acting according to that. And instead of getting into this discussion that how, I mean, there can be numerous circumstances that a woman has to leave alone. I mean, every woman is not always guarded and present with the mahram, father, husband, her husband working in some other country, or her brother or father is not around. So how, if he has to carry out some activities? I mean, there are compulsions, there are limitations. We cannot just apply this formula that, okay, you have to be careful. I mean, this is not the statement which obviously is expected from those whose job is to ensure safety.
But doesn't it in a sense say that, when you are saying all of these other considerations, doesn't it in a sense say that, look, we cannot do the job? I mean, it doesn't really inspire confidence in women. It doesn't in other women, traveling alone, like you're saying, doing a lot of other activities alone. It really is just saying, well, protect yourself. Don't go out. Don't do these things. Isn't that what the statement is saying?
I have already spoken about the statement. I mean, nobody can recommend it, nobody can accept it. And that is why Chief Minister has also called an explanation from CCPO. And from the government side, a number of ministers have spoken against his statement. I mean, there is no doubt about that.
Right, okay.
What you are saying basically is, even if he has not said this statement, this single incident, it will give a sense of insecurity to every woman, to everybody who has a daughter, who has a sister, who has a wife. I mean, that man is also not feeling safe that, okay, in this country this can happen. So he is worried. So it's a shock. It's a shock. But on the other hand, what I would recommend that, I mean, on the media, I was watching different programs, there is a need that instead of going into the details of that incident, because I have seen on the social media that very unnecessary details are going on there. I mean, it is uncalled for. It is also speaking about the mindset of the society. That is also a subject which needs to be addressed.
Very, very true, and this is what I want to talk about more than anything else. I will come to you. I'm going to go to Barrister Safiullah Gauri. Safiullah, what about the legal side of things? We have, before we go on and talk about the society, as far as laws are concerned, we have been talking about how we need legal reform for a while now. But in terms of this particular instance, as far as the Pakistan Penal Code is concerned, like we were earlier discussing, it's clearly a crime. It doesn't matter whether Women Protection Bill says and that, whatever. This is a crime. And this will be covered under the Pakistan Penal Code.
Absolutely. Section 375, gang rape, it's punishable by death. I don't think the law can offer anything more than that. It's an offense that not only offers death penalty, but also if in case it's not proven substantially, then there's going to be all sorts of different evidence that can be brought in, like DNA evidence. But Mahrukh, I think that's not the problem. Pakistan, as we have had many other shows, Pakistan has a lot of laws. If those laws are implemented and if proper justice is done, then there is really no problem. With the same laws, with the same set of laws, you see UK, which gave us these laws, functioning just fine. This is what it is. But the problem here is two-faceted. It is, number one, the lack of interest of the government in ensuring that those laws are implemented, because the courts cannot do anything until and unless they are given proper evidence. And we can see how determined the government is to resolve these issues when the CCPO comes forward, blames the victim, and then it's not just the CCPO. It is the
minister, a special assistant to the Prime Minister, who comes forward and says that no, the CCPO statement should not be taken in an incorrect sense. He was right. So we have a serious problem where we have the highest levels of the federal government supporting the statements of the CCPO, and of course the CCPO himself, who has not been suspended yet, not been thrown out of his job as yet. The fact remains that this is the reflection of the government's mindset, and this is a reflection of the public's mindset. It is very unfortunate that half of our population, which is women, we keep talking of them as women as if they're a separate object, but they are literally half of us. And it's not about women who are getting raped alone either. Men are getting raped, kids are getting raped. Think about the trauma of the kids who went through all of this.
But that sense of security that should be there in any society,
it's
any
obviously
civilized
not there.
society,
Yes.
it's not there.
It's not there, and it's not just this incident. If we were to look at only the last 3 days, in the last 3 days we had a 5-year-old girl in Karachi who was raped and burnt. Her body was found. We have the incidents of a transgender who was shot dead in Peshawar, and then we have this incident. Nobody is safe in this country. You could be an infant and you are not safe. And this mindset, unfortunately, is constantly being propagated. That no, it's somehow the victim's fault. Why were they out late at night? Why did they have enough petrol in their car? What were they doing? If they came from a foreign country, they still think that they are living in that foreign country. How dare they say these things and then get away with them consistently? So, Mahrukh, no, I don't think the laws are the problem here. I think that the mindset, the prevalent mindset is what the problem is. If this is a mindset this mindset of the CCPO is being carried forward by the government at the federal level, at the provincial level, if this is the mindset that is being carried forward by the prosecutors, by the judges, then that is the result you will get.
But Safiullah, even apart from that, apart from the legal side of things, we do want to see, we want to see heads roll at this point.
Absolutely.
For the lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But for that to happen, we need, don't you think there are certain problems as far as our legal system is also concerned? It's not only
it's
just
interesting, yes, and I agree with you here. So, for instance, there has only been that once, the last execution that I know of, where a person was actually given capital punishment, was in the Zainab case, and that too after the immense hue and cry by the public. If the hue and cry had not been as strong, maybe that man would not have maybe his head would still be intact as well. I suppose that this is a debate that we really ought to be having. I've recently been seeing the debate on social media as well, that we should bring back public hanging as was proposed by Ziaul Haq. I am definitely not a proponent of public hanging. I don't want more violence, and I don't want
accountability, definitely.
Of course,
in terms of accountability, but it's so dragged, unfortunately.
But Mahrukh, the question is, can we truly blame now the entire accountability process when the government is not spending any money on updating the forensics, the investigations, training them to this is one of the most underfunded departments in the country, where all of our funding is going instead to other meaningless things. This is the result that one should be expecting. And so until and unless the government decides to make it a priority, safety is something that should matter. Unfortunately, I don't believe that it's a priority for this government or the governments that have come before.
Right, we will take this back to Jawad Sahab, but I'm going to go to Faika ji. Faika, let's talk about the mindset, so to speak. And that doesn't just mean the mindset, it just means the societal mindset generally. Not, there is generally this sense of whatever has been echoed in the statements that came forward is, unfortunately, he's not the only one who's saying this. Unfortunately, he has a voice. And that voice is what we need to be concerned about. What do you think? Do you think there's any chance things will change at all?
Mahrukh, I can only be hopeful that I mean, as a woman, I hope things change. We need to condemn this frame of mind for sure. This frame of mind will lead us nowhere. It's just basically where, everybody is thinking that the victim is at fault. You're giving, you're giving the preparator of this crime an excuse to do this at the end of the day. You're allowing it to some extent by making such statements.
You're making it okay. You're
making it okay.
In a
and
sense,
I'd like to add, Mahrukh, that this is just not about women. It's about every single person living in this country. Everyone needs to feel safe, regardless of who they are, regardless of what time they're getting out, regardless of what they're doing, what they're wearing. We need to make sure that we're protected as civilians. That's one of the fundamental basic rights of every human.
Right, exactly. I'm going to go to Maheen with this. Maheen, you're also a psychologist, so a little I want to ask you as far as the other side of things also, in terms of course the trauma that not only the mother went through, the children also saw, and unfortunately they will probably live with for the rest of their lives. That kind of trauma, what kind of healing does our society offer for that? And unfortunately also, again, the mindset that maybe a lot of us around, people around us are not saying the same things, they're not voicing what remarks have already been made, but that doesn't mean they're not thinking the same thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mahrukh, for having me. First of all, I feel like this has shaken all of us, and we say this every time, but like you said, nothing changes. And nothing changes because of the mindset, of the entitlement, of the fear they create for women and how they want to control them. And that is what has to change on a root level, which means educating our children, educating ourselves, teaching our children about consent. And that has to change. Otherwise, no matter how much punishment you give, it's not going to change. There will be more, and they'll be raping more women. So that has to change. And I also want to say that women do not get raped for the clothes that or because they're not careful enough. They get raped because men rape them. They violate them, they rob them of trust, of security, of everything. And we can't even imagine what this woman and her children might be going through and why. This is something that has happened to each one of us. We've traveled on those roads. There are times where we don't have petrol, and it could have been each one of us. And I think that is what is that has shaken us. So the question is, just because of someone else's demons and their darkness, this woman will forever, in some way, be imprisoned in her own mind and her own body. And how tragic is that? We deserve better than that. Our women deserve better than that. The trauma will never leave this family. It won't. And to say that she should be brave and she should, brave through it, no, why should she have to? Why should she have to be brave? It will require a lot of healing, but sometimes even that is not enough. How do you come to terms with the trauma that her children might have had to go through? For this woman, while she is going through something so horrific and life-altering, I'm sure all she was wondering was how to protect her children, and she couldn't. And how traumatizing is that? I also want to say that people who have gone through abuse, and if you know somebody that's gone through abuse, there has to be a system, and we don't have systems. Do we have, like we were speaking about, DNA regulation? We don't. Do we have DNA sampling? We don't. Do we know that if we see a victim of abuse, we should take them to a secure place? We need to get them counseling. There's so much that needs to happen, and it doesn't. We have no systems in place. We are not protected. We are not protected in our homes, in our schools, and our work. We're no longer protected on the streets. So where do we go from here? How do we change this? The women have to change it for themselves. We have to do this for ourselves. Even if there's resistance, we have to keep fighting because there's no other way. We don't have any other choice.
Right. I'm going to go to Nayab Gohar with this. Nayab, what can you add to this? Of course, Maheen is right. We do need to fight and continue fighting ourselves. Us women, there's no other way. But as far as society is concerned, we talk about education, we talk about how we need to educate people. Of course, these are long-term goals. In your opinion, do you think that accountability perhaps, or perhaps we need a deterrent effect? We need some sort of formula that will perhaps jolt this society into realizing that they need to make it a safe place, not just for women. Like we said, it's not just women. Infants are not safe in this country, and so many instances in the last couple of weeks have shown that.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I think Maheen also summed it up very well. There are a couple of things that I'd like to add. The first thing is that how do we view violence inflicted upon women? Do we view this as as isolated incidents that do not have a systematic, a pattern behind them, a logic behind them, or a certain, certain amount of cultural backing behind them? Because if you view it like that, then you're absolutely wrong. Because you have, in order to counter rape in the long term, you have to view it as something that's happening systematically, something that is entrenched and linked to patriarchal violence, and you have to understand that rape, sexual violence, honor killings, domestic violence, these are hardly, these are mostly about just the brute display of power. These are the things that you have to understand, that these are mechanisms of controlling women. So once you understand this, once you situate rape within the spectrum of sexual violence inflicted upon us within a patriarchal system, that's when you can move towards long-term solutions. And like you said, so I think, world over, people are moving from, just this singular fixation on retribution and accountability to reformative justice, transformative justice. And that does not mean that I don't condone retribution. Of course I do. I think the culprits should be punished. But I am someone who believes in the certainty of punishment over the severity of punishment. And I'm someone who believes that, this might, and I have to stress this, there are so many men who try to paint these people as outsider barbarians who have nothing to do with this society. And that is wrong. These men, predators, are everywhere in society. They're not just, these outsider barbarians that they're painted out to be. This happens. Uncles rape their nieces. Fathers do this to their daughters. Brothers do this to their sisters. Husbands do this to their wives. You have to understand that this is everywhere and it's rampant. Don't try to distance yourself from these men, because then you try to get impunity, and then you don't try to self-reflect and understand what is it about our society that's enabling this behavior within men. And this is what I mean when I say transformative justice or reformative justice, that yes, punishments, but also a deep, hard look at patriarchal attitudes. And that's, where things that Maheen said, which is that you need to open up the conversation about consent. And over here, I don't just mean in schools. You taught people patriarchy on multiple levels. You taught children about there's just one type of good woman and one type of bad woman inside homes, inside schools, on the media, in the police. Unlearn it in these multiple institutions as well. It's not just about school campuses. This is about every level where you can educate and make people aware and teach them that women are human beings and their consent matters and you can't violate their bodies. This conversation needs to happen at every level of society. It's not just about,
Very true. Right. I will come back to you. I'm going to go to Jawad Sabji. Jawad Sab, these are, of course, goals that our society must move forward. And Maheen and Nayab are very, very right when they say that we need to have that conversation everywhere. But what, as in terms of reform, that has always been talked about as far as the PTI is concerned. We've been talking to you about it on other shows also, legal reform and as far as what police reform is concerned. When we want to see in the next 6 months, in the next 5 months, in the next 4 months, to prevent more incidents like this, we need to see some sort of a change. We need to see some sort of a reaction come out. Whether we can move towards long-term goals, granted we need to. But will the government move towards any of those, short-term solutions also? Will we need, because we talked about how in the last couple of weeks we've seen so many instances where this has happened and there is a hue and cry, there is, an outcry on social media also, and then suddenly, once that settles, another incident happens again.
Mahrukh, first of all, we must realize this fact that the institutional decline or the social decline, it is not just a matter of few months or years. This occurs over the decades. And in Pakistan, the institutions, because of violation of merit, because of political influence, so whether it is police or it is the legal system or it is the judicial system or it is the investigative system or other political institutions, I mean, they have all declined over the decades because of these reasons. Now, there is a huge expectation from the present government, and probably it is very rightly expected because people wanted a change because people were fed up what all was happening in last many years and many decades. And that is why we see a ray of hope ever since this government has taken up, whether it is a matter of economy, whether it is a matter of taking a stand on Kashmir, whether it is going through the most difficult phase of Corona, whether it is trying to improve the police system or trying to bring in the merit. I mean, all these things are being addressed, and the government is very serious. And I'm sure we should not conclude this incident just relating it to the happening. I mean, the second part is that how the police and the law enforcement agencies, they react, and how do they apprehend the people who are responsible for it. So the performance of the police has to be seen, that how after this incident, yes, the performance of police is also required before the incident happens, and that's about creating a safe environment.
So
that's about creating
right, exactly.
safety.
And when we're not only talking, look at the motorway police. There's a lot of criticism on social media. We've been discussing this before also. Since the incident happened, that there was no one to answer her call when she called the emergency number. So whether it's undercapacitated, or whether there's not enough people, or whatever the issues are at that in motorway, for example, where are we going to point out the problem there also? Are we going to say that if who is responsible for not having someone man that emergency station? Are we going to look at those things also, or is it just going to be about dealing with this incident alone? Or saying that don't travel at night alone.
Mahrukh, it's not very easy to find the solution from a single incident. For example, in America, if a black man is, he's murdered the way it was shown on the television and social media everywhere, if we try to evaluate the performance of the American police on that single incident, perhaps you may not be able to find the solution. Every incident basically provides you an opportunity to look into the breaches, to look into the demerits, look into the deficiencies in the system, and try to bring about reforms. So I would also consider this incident that it's a big wake-up call, the kind of incidents which are happening on a very fast pace in our society, and it is happening all around. I mean, the other participant very rightly pointed out that in the same week you see an incident in KPK, you see an incident in Karachi, you see an incident in Lahore. So it is happening all over Pakistan. So there is a social decline. There is a serious social issues. The people without employment, people without education, people getting frustrated. I mean, this is a subject which perhaps a psychologist would attend better, that how this sickness of mind is overcoming, are leading towards such incidents.
So, there's no two opinions about it, and I'm glad and I'm very, happy that you're part of the government when you are talking about all of these issues, and, I think everybody's glad when they hear your opinion on this. Of course, there is a societal problem. Of course, there's a social problem. Of course, there's a, as a society, we are quite near, our moral death when we issue statements like this. But what about the systemic problems? Do you think the government is going to deal with the systemic issues? Because maybe it will be easier, maybe it's a short-term solution. When there are people who will actually answer your emergencies, there are people who will actually protect you. You will have a force that not just make statements like this, but says that we are there to protect you. We will protect you. Have confidence in us. Travel at night. Travel with your children. You need to have that kind of confidence in your in your protective agencies, whether it's the police, whether it's whoever is guarding your state. Isn't that true? Don't you agree with that?
Mahrukh, I agree that this should be the expectation of the public from the government, any government.
Right.
But now you want to have solution, you want to have a safe environment from a system, from a society which has touched rock bottom in every aspect. and now we have to rise from there. Obviously, it will take time. The government is taking steps. In Punjab, on one hand, we are being criticized for changing 5 IGs, but on the other hand, it is also an effort to find out a good leader, a good manager for the police who can, from the same system, you know, all the police, whether it is at the low rank or the middle tiers or the top tiers, I mean, once you have violated those merits over decades and over years, so you can imagine the kind of caliber of the people who might be responsible for our safety. I mean, so once you have compromised on the foundation of a system, and now you are expecting a complete change, I mean, it has to be done from the foundations. It has to be done, of course, on the branches and on the tree top. You have to cut things. So there are many approaches which can be adopted, and I'm sure government is working on those.
Ji, Basis Safiullah Gauri, ji, isn't it, Safiullah, in a sense, I know I'm making it oversimplistic, but don't you think in a sense it can boil down to this, that we would like people to do their jobs? As far as safety is concerned.
Yes, of course. I mean, there is no denying that people should be doing their job. And I also agree with what Ahmed Jawad said, that 2 years is not a sufficient time to try and change an entire mindset that this country has developed over the last 70 years. But we can always see the direction that the government is taking. Now, I'll echo what Nayab Saiba said a little while ago, because this is a systemic issue, and this is an issue that requires us to talk about a variety of things. We need to start talking about consent. We need to start talking about what sexual education is. And so all of this will start when we start understanding that we are a patriarchal society, that this is a society where the public space has been monopolized by men, that women are not welcome in this society, despite the fact that we call them equal humans. They do not have the same amount of rights. Men can walk around at 12 in the night, women cannot. And so we need to understand why this is the case. Why is it that women are not being allowed to come out? And if we were to understand that it is the case because a particular segment of the society is consistently trying to dominate the other, then what can we do to curb it? Now, one of the ways of curbing it is through education. And education is a great way. Now, Ms. Faika, who's a renowned academic, will back me up on this. Education is a great way, but what we see with the government is that we are taking 2 steps back. For the first time in Pakistan's history, we have, for instance, chapters of sexual reproduction being taken out of our science books, so that people don't even understand the basics of what it is. Anything that had to do with foreign women, like for instance mentions of Florence Nightingale, a very renowned woman who was in Pakistan, taken out, and instead old Arab conquerors being constantly put into syllabi. And so that's what's happening. Men are consistently being told that the true heroic men have to be sword-wielding, barbaric, horse-riding men, because that's what our Prime Minister apparently wants when he watches Ardugul on TV as well. And so that's the lesson that men are constantly getting.
Right, Gina.
I would like to clarify this.
Let me go to WhatsApp.
That's an interesting question. I would like to clarify. Yeah. So I mean, when he mentions about Ardugul, I mean, yes, I remember my generation, generation before me, and even the youth today. Ask them about the different histories in the world. They will talk about the British history. They will talk about the American history. They will talk about the Roman history. They would remember, they would know the characters in those histories. But ask them about the greatest empire ever created on this earth, the Ottoman Empire. Who was the founder? What does Ottoman means? And how this empire, it rose, and how it fell. I mean, you need to know your own history. If you call yourself Muslim, then the Islamic history is your history. Whether this history was in Turkey, this history was in Spain, or this history was in Medina, it is your history. And you have to tell your generation. So I'm very glad, because for the first time, I felt secure for my daughters to sit with them and watch something which teaches moral values. It's not all about barbarism. in those episodes and serials, you know, you are taught that how a daughter should behave, how a son, a father, a wife should behave. I mean, these are the virtues, the Islamic virtues, the values which we should, and we should not laugh on this thing. It will be, I mean, I would strongly object if I'm talking about the Islamic values and virtues and somebody sitting next to me is laughing. This is something very insulting. If you are a Muslim,
I am sorry, I think you're the one insulting our culture.
I am not insulting. I'm telling you what is our culture. Our culture rise from Medina. Our culture rise from Spain. Our culture does not rise from Roman Empire.
And that is what you know. That's why women get raped.
And that is.
I think we have to move on. We have to move on.
Yeah, you
let's go.
Want to work on those things.
I'd like to say
and it is happening in America. It is happening in England. It is happening in Europe.
I think you've made your point.
There are even worse incidents are happening. So if we are taking this point in Pakistan that this is an Islamic country and it is happening only here, it is happening those civilized countries where you get inspired every day.
Right.
I'd like to say that the difference between Pakistan and other countries is that I feel that at all levels there's a basic training which is given and which basically means that there's awareness which is created in line with what rights women have, how we should deal with victims.
Right.
All of this training is not given to our policemen. That is the reason why we have such a mindset. If you get the training as to how we need to deal with victims, what the basic women rights are at every level. Exactly. Police reform is not about a reform related to administration, etc. It's the basic training that they need to get.
Right.
Because at this point of time, I think that their mentality is exactly what is being shown on or what is being promoted by their seniors. That's something that lingers down to the very bottom as well.
Agreed. And when we talk about police reform, which is, I'll come back on that to Jawad Sahab also, but when we talk about police reform, we're not just talking about administrative reform, and, when he mentions the change of the IG, that